Um, Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge and celebrate the First Nations people on whose traditional lands I'm joining from. I would specifically like to acknowledge the Bidjigal people that are the traditional custodians of the land on which the UNSW Sydney Kensington campus stands. I would also like to pay my respect to the elders, both past and present, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are present here today. So thank you everybody for joining us today for this SPRC CSRH seminar. My name's Kira Smith. I'm a Senior Research Fellow at the Social Policy Research Centre, and I'll be hosting today's seminar. And today we're delighted to have Dr. Joyce Wu, who will present Women's Empowerment or Bargaining with the Patriarchy, a case study of Bangladeshi migrant women workers' experiences. Dr. Joyce Wu is a senior lecturer at the School of Social Sciences, Faculty of Arts, Design and Architecture at UNSW. As a gender and development researcher and educator, Joyce has previously worked with DFAT, UN Women and the CSIRO. So Joyce will speak for around 40 to 45 minutes, and that will be followed by a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So before we begin, can everyone just please make sure you're muted, which that'll help with the audio. And if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them via the chat function, and we will get to them in the Q&A session. And please note that this is being recorded, and Zoom also has auto captions. If you, I've enabled them. I'm not too sure if me enabling them enables everybody else to see them. But if you need to turn on closed captions, click on the CC button at the bottom of your screen. So thank you. I'll hand over to Joyce now.
Thank you, Kira, and thank you everyone for joining in this afternoon. I would also like to acknowledge that I am presenting this from the Bidjigal, unceded Bidjigal land, and that sovereignty always was and will be. I'd also like to pay my respect to elders past and present, and to extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who are attending to this seminar. If people, would like to share which country they are in, please feel free to do so in the chat box. Okay, so it's sort of going to be 40 minutes, although it may be a little bit shorter. Don't know, it depends. I tend to be more quite economical in my presentation, so we'll see. We could have more time for conversations. So this is an overview of the seminar for today. I'll be providing a context of the project. The concept of patriarchal bargaining was coined by Denise Candioti, the research methodology and some of the challenges that we encountered, and the key findings, followed by conclusions and discussions. So the context is this was part of a research evaluation funded by the United Kingdom government to support an international labour organisation program, Work in Freedom 2. It was a phase 2 of a anti-trafficking project aimed at supporting South Asian women, particularly from Nepal and Bangladesh, who migrate to the Middle East to work in the garment sector and the domestic work sector. So the project came in two parts. We conducted Nepal research first, then followed by Bangladesh. For the purpose of this presentation, I will be talking about the Bangladesh findings, which is the more recent work that we've been doing. And I am also very proud to say that this is a really amazing team of academics and colleagues, with Professor Saida Rosanna Rashid from University of Dhaka, Associate Professor Patrick Kilby from Australian National University, and Dr. Noor Mohammed Saka from Bangladesh Institute of Law and International Affairs. And both Professor Rashid and Dr. Saka were particularly instrumental in the fieldwork data collection. The grant was awarded by the UK government in late 2019, well before the pandemic. And so when we had initially drawn up the project, it was all thought that, we would be conducting the fieldwork in 2021, plenty of time for analysis and so forth. But due to the pandemic, fieldwork was delayed and then conducted in March 2022 at a much shorter time than we had expected. So, and I will talk also a bit more about the challenges brought about by the pandemic in relation to the fieldwork. So, just to give an overall broad context of Bangladesh women and labour migration, when the project looks at short-term migration, and in short-term, by short-term, the definition is at least 3 months. But no more than 12 months long. And so what that means is often women, migrant workers would become the sort of serial migrant workers, go out overseas, work, come back, rest for a few months before going back out again. So it's a very demanding, demanding sort of work. And over sort of 9 years, the short-term labour migration increased from 10,000 in 2010 to 96,881 in 2019, so sort of almost tenfold. And according to Siddiqui and all, 80% of all the women from Bangladesh are employed in a labour market abroad, mainly in 2 professions, domestic work and cleaning. And so the prospect for upward mobility of jobs are slower. Mostly the women who go overseas abroad for work are from rural areas, with 3/4 having up to primary school education, and 1/3 having not completed any education. And so what that meant is the job prospects, career prospects for Bangladesh women within their own home settings are also limited. But what's attractive about going overseas to work is, the amount that they earn overseas is significantly more than if they are a domestic worker within their own home country. And so that is where the attraction is coming from. Nevertheless, the class, education, gender inequality, the structural disadvantages mean that Bangladesh women face greater risks when migrating because of fewer choices and resources available to them to mitigate these risks, as well as gendered and racial perceptions about female migrant workers, particularly those who occupy the domestic work sector, a lot of gendered stereotypes and assumptions, and also labour discrimination and unfair work condition that emerge as a result, and I will go over them as well. Let's see what's happened with that. There we are. So in context of when we analyze the experiences of the women migrant workers, we found that there is a lot of resonance with Denise Candiotti's concept of patriarchal bargaining, and that is a concept which has also been used in other migration literature as well. But just to give a quick overview, Denise, the patriarchal bargaining is a concept created by Candiotti, who is an anthropologist, and basically the premise is that within any society, there are gendered norms and constraints, and women find themselves strategizing within a set of concrete constraints to attain stability, resources, and protection. Okay, so what that means is they look at what they have available, what are the rules according to gendered norms, what's available for women, and they negotiate for these within these constraints in order to get resources and protection within a male-dominant society. And it's really important, Candioti stresses, that patriarchal bargains, that these bargaining processes are not timeless or immutable entities. So social conditions, stakeholders, and women themselves play a crucial role in shaping the outcomes. So, these sort of patriarchal rules, norms, and so on, they're not the same decade after decade, but rather they change over time. And so how women interpret those changes, those norms, those shifting patterns of gender relations in relation to intersections of class, ethnicity, caste, sexual orientation, disability, education level, so on and so forth, matters a lot. And so within the context of Bangladesh, Work and Freedom 2, the program that we were evaluating, is an ILO program aimed at supporting women and girls from the origin or source countries, so India, Bangladesh, and Nepal, to decent jobs with safety and dignity of workers in destination countries. And the focus were on India, Lebanon, Jordan, Oman, and Kuwait. Although our research, what we found with the participants have been primarily in Lebanon and Jordan, where they end up. And so the Work and Freedom 2 was all about how do we reduce instances of trafficking, whether people were deceived or people choose illegal migration due to what they see as lack of better migration options. Okay, and you might wonder, well, why would people choose to traffic themselves or arrange for themselves to be trafficked? Well, there are very complex reasons. It's not a black and white. There's no binary sort of viewpoint, and I will explain. Hopefully, it will become clear as I discuss the findings. And in our research, typically it's sort of assumed that patriarchal bargaining, so in terms of women negotiating for better working conditions, better pay conditions, sort of begin after they have left the home country. So after, once they arrive in a destination country, they have to negotiate with the employers, negotiate with migration agencies, and so forth. But in our research, we find that women begin to bargain with patriarchy well before the overseas travel begin, sort of starting from home. Before that, just to quickly go over the methodology, we went with a qualitative focus group discussions and interviews due to the relative time constraints. We conducted overall 16 focus group with 112 women, which consists of returnee migrant workers from the Middle East, women who aspire to become migrants, and those who haven't gone yet and who remain undecided. Okay, so there was sort of 3 cohorts that we spoke with. And due to this, of course, this sensitive nature of this topic, all the participants' identifying details have been removed. A total of 22 individual interviews, key informants were conducted, including husbands of current female migrant workers, local government officials, NGOs, non-government organizations, and migration agents. Migration agents play a pivotal, critical role in getting women basically out of the country, getting the official papers and so out of the country. We were also interested in talking with the husbands because we wanted to explore how do couples, within that interpersonal relationship dynamics, how do they make those decisions, and whether women had to negotiate with their husband in order to get to make a joint decision or to get approval to go overseas and work. Conducted in 8 areas of 5 female migration intensive districts of Bangladesh: Dhaka, Narayanganj, Manikanj, Ghazipur, Nasindi, all located within the Dhaka division. The focus group participants were a mix of those who have attended the ILO Work and Freedom 2 training and those who did not. Okay, the Work and Freedom training were basically sort of like these short 1 day training, 1.5 day training, pre-departure training to give them information about their labor rights, you know, what to do if they find themselves in various scenarios of, you know, how to identify exploitation, who to seek to help, and so on and so forth. How we find the women was the referrals were given by local NGOs who are part of this ILO project. Now, the challenge is that there were biases, you know, because these are people referred to us by the NGOs, but without the NGOs' referrals, access to the local communities would not be possible. The NGOs were not present at the interviews themselves, and the discussions were not related to what the NGOs were doing in terms of, you know, to reduce the bias. So based on that, we felt that, you know, all considerations, the risk of bias was mitigated. Some other challenges were that we had to conduct these research in sort of stages. During the pandemic, we had to do by phone or virtual by Zoom for data collection with the key informants, and then for the focus group and some of the other key informants, we did so in the field. And of course, because these are very busy people, there were frequent sort of changes to schedules and so on. Now, the reasons for migration, some of these are key reasons, as shared by the woman. Financial hardship is the key, so not being able to find suitable jobs with a decent income. Sometimes it is due to the drug and alcohol addiction of the husband, which places financial burden upon the family, which is often combined in with domestic violence or family violence. Also, we found that there are also divorced women seeking livelihood options to support children, you know, finding themselves in a woman-headed household, and that's very, very tough. Inequality, one woman said, on at least 8 occasions out of 10, our opinion is not valued by the family members, and better salaries aboard. And so it's part of that, you know, there's a unhappiness in terms of and unhappiness in terms of where they are, their situation in family life, marriage life, which are often become one of the key drivers, along with financial incentives. Kira, I've just noticed that there are some questions in the chat. Do you want me to look at them now, or should we wait until?
I think we can wait till the end. Some of them, as somebody noted, there's some good networking going on. We've got people joining us from Bangladesh. So yeah, I think we can probably leave the questions till the end. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. The costs of migration is significant. Financial cost is very high. There's also sort of fees attached to these processes. And in addition, there's also what we found is there's also a fee to actually expedite work visa and other paperwork. And unless you have money to expedite the process, you could end up waiting for months on end. And so then the costs that women have quoted to us varied, but it's around $6,000, $7,000 or up. And there's also the emotional cost. So it's not just a financial cost, but sometimes women face stigma and rejection from community and family because it's seen as, well, you know, because you're poor, you have to go overseas. And children left behind. One of the things that we weren't able to explore fully, but my colleague, Professor Saida Rashid, had explored in her other work, is that children left behind are often bullied and teased at school, which can then lead to school dropouts. Also, the lack of childcare, available childcare or supervision, means that girls can also face early marriage, as women are concerned about the lack of supervision of their daughters while the mothers are away. The process of migration agents that allows are a necessity, and they're often involved even in the simple matter of obtaining a passport. And how the laws operate, there are those who are very transparent and wanting to being very open about processes, and those who are less so. So it's really based on a case to case. But they do hold a lot of power. So part of that patriarchal bargaining is also about knowing, finding an agent that you can work with, and who you can, if necessary, bargain with. And they could. Oh, sorry. I'll just close the student activities outside in the campus grounds. The agents can also hold onto the passport and actually use them to ask for more money. So debt trapped can be common. And the agents can be those working in migration agencies or informal ones, including returning migrant women workers seeking to recruit new people. And so they facilitate a very complex process of contracts, and also the renewal of contracts in terms of, how we talk about women who come back from a stint, then the agent would be the ones who set up another contract for them to return to. Pre-departure training. So women travel with the official visa are required to attend pre-departure training. In the ILO figures show that in 2021, 30,000 women in Bangladesh were provided with information and outreach activities. So, about pre-departure, migration information and so forth. And a further 5,000 completed a 1.5-day NGO training, which covered issues such as workers' rights, gender issues, child marriage, particularly around sort of the risks of, trying to marry your daughter off early, and try to prevent that. Women in the focus group found that the more local the NGOs who deliver the pre-departure training, the more helpful and context specific that they are. So in the sense that, the more accurate information, knowing what the local woman's needs are, knowing what the sort of support networks they have already on hand, knowing whether their families are supportive or not, and that makes a lot of difference. And they also said, they much prefer door-to-door interactions by NGOs and group meetings with NGO staff, because these are seen as more informal, more relaxed space for women to gather and ask questions. And they're better able to, ask questions around how to reduce migration costs, the fees, and also how to have autonomy over the income. Okay, some of the women we found, have separate bank account from their husband, which then they disperse the money to their husband and to their families. And so the autonomy, that sense of control over the finance of the money that they earn, is also really important. And it's within that safe space of being supported by local NGOs that women can find those information, and also from women who have previously worked overseas and come back and happy to share their knowledge. So working abroad, high risks, especially in the domestic work sector. But also we also came across women who worked in garment, or some even worked in poultry type of farms, factory sort of settings, equally with very precarious circumstances. Brokers can withhold salary, or women were promised to be paid a certain amount, and once they get there, it's something else. Physical and sexual violence prevalent, or the threat of them, that the threat would happen. One woman, for example, said, "I went to Jordan for a year due to severe physical violence. I was forced to return to Bangladesh to sell a piece of land of mine to manage the airfare to back home." Other forms of abusive behavior from employers, being detained at workplace. The workplace also happens to be the home where, the so-called home where the migrant domestic workers find themselves in. And home is not a safe space. It's their work, simultaneously their workspace and also where they live. Some women were fed only once a day. Some of the employers would destroy these women's documents, or even their phone as well. Common. There were some instances where returning women have said, I've had a positive work relations with my employers. They give me days off, fair wage, even help with, charging the phone, or, trying to help them with finding other contracts to work on as well. And again, it's that, women having to negotiate within that very precarious and volatile, unpredictable condition of employers can behave in, extreme spectrum, can be either very abusive or, sort of behave within the expectation of what an employer should be. And I think I was about to say a good employer, but it's really about, this is actually about providing a normal workspace, a safe workspace. And surely that is the human rights of everyone who deserve that. The kafala system is one of the challenges why the abuse and exploitation occur. The kafala system is a patronage system where the sponsor or employer have essentially a legal responsibility over the migrant worker. A lot of the so Jordan, Qatar, and others are among countries that have the kafala system. So most of the Middle East countries. And what that meant, so ostensibly, on paper, it sounds nice. It sounds like, the employer oversees the welfare of the employee, looks after them, do this and that for them. But in reality, often it means women being subjected under a lot of power and control by those employers, and then they find themselves in long working hours and poor conditions whilst being heavily monitored. Some sponsors also subcontract the Bangladesh women, who then find themselves working in multiple households, cafes and factories or shops which are owned by the sponsors or the sponsors' friends. And the sponsor earns a fee for enabling this arrangement. Now, most of the women whom we interviewed found this to be an agreeable setting, because it means they can work in different employers and to have several, that they top up their income this way. And from the sponsor's perspective, it works for them because, they may not be able to hire them for the entire 7 days a week. And so what they do is sort of subcontract out these women. But again, it's a very precarious circumstance in which, women with more confidence, language skills, and experience of having done this before are better placed to, negotiate on the working hours, the terms, maybe, hey, I prefer to work in in a shop rather than a cafe. I don't want to work in a cafe where I have to serve alcohol, that sort of thing. and some women may not don't have that bargaining power. And so the women who are able to do this are often, go back to their communities and try to help other migrant women to find jobs this way. So, once they're in, whether back home in the community, they share their experience of, hey, this is how it works, and you can earn more money this way. Or once they're in the destination country, they try to support other women to find jobs this way as well. Might be tempting to see this as a sort of like a win-win situation, but it is an illegal process because women are not meant to work in more than one place. And so if they're caught, these women faces the greatest risk, which is deportation and any other legal consequences that the destination country might throw at them. Upon return, most women interviewed decide to go back for more migration work because we unfortunately, many of them reported facing stigma from their family, from the communities upon return. There is guesses about their promiscuity, sort of rumors about them engaging in sex work and that sort of thing. And then once they come back, they find that there is, even though they have gained all these skills of working in shops and cafes and, different language skills, locally still the lack of decent jobs and salaries, which pushes them back overseas again. And so then they become sort of serial, fly in, fly out almost type of migrant workers. Some women do become more well regarded by their family, especially those who were able to attain financial success and, able to send regular amount of money back home. And so there is, pride in being able to say, hey, because of me, my children are able to complete middle school or high school, going through university or being able to help the family to improve the home construction or new equipments and furnitures and so forth. However, the experiences are mixed. So this is one returnee who she said, usually I could not take any decisions in the family before going to work abroad. However, I have noticed that after returning home now, family members respect my decisions regarding family matters if I make any. On the contrary, society never respects us for being migrant workers. We do believe the experience of working abroad has strengthened our position in the family. If we had not gone abroad, our children might not have been educated. And so in this woman's case, she experienced better treatment, an improved status within her family. Her children's prospects have improved as a result, but still feeling, in the social standing, however, the financial and the, economic prosperity did not actually change their status. Another quote, many people have many questions. Many people criticizes us, while some of them supported as well. So this is from a migrant woman's husband. I tell them that I have sent my wife abroad for a job and a good salary so that she can contribute to our family. Another returned migrant woman said, yes, it helped us with financial benefits. We would not have become financially independent if we had not gone abroad for work. However, many people in society still do not respect us for the sacrifices we made for our family. There is a perception prevalent in society that those who go abroad to work are not good women. Keeping aside older criticism, our position in society has improved. And so this woman has taken a more a stand against the societal judgments and to say, well, actually, overall, we have actually changed changed a lot in life and for the better, but it does come at a cost. So some concluding thoughts. What we have found in the study is that women find themselves bargaining with patriarchal systems, norms at every stages of the migration process. They have to bargain with their family, their husband, to get tacit endorsement, to leave. They have to bargain with the migration agents to get a better migration fee and a faster processes. And they once upon departure training, that's another sort of bargaining in terms of how do I get better information, how do I get useful information. And upon return, at the destination country, again, the patriarchal bargaining processes where they are conforming, to the docile domestic workers and so forth, in order to gain the employer's trust, in the hope that that could lead to other subcontracting jobs, or at least decent treatment, fair wage, and being allowed to come back home. And part of that is, I think, the challenge is that in the dominant development narrative, there is often a temptation to equate financial success with empowerment. If we think about, for example, microfinance, sort of seeing as the silver bullet of migration, silver bullet to end poverty, as if economic or some sort of security and stability can bring about individual or community empowerment. But what we have found, my colleagues and I, is that financial successes and livelihoods can make some changes, but not necessarily the overall woman's status in the community or the overall status in society, migrant woman's status. And that very complex experiences of intersectional marginalization, but also empowerment, is a very complex one, and it cannot be a binary of victims and heroines sort of narrative. And in terms of the recommendations from us, then, is that there are several, there's quite a few actually, but for the purpose of this, and I've also got 2 minutes left, is that one of the things that came through is that pre-departure training to support migrant women, whether they're going back again or whether they're new, it needs to change from the standard classroom training. There are these other official ones, which lasts for 1 month, which includes language training, that tend to get a mixed response from migrant women, because they simply don't have time to undertake 1 month of training, usually away from their community as well. And so a more community-based approach, so outreach, door-to-door, community events, information sessions, which are more delivered by local NGOs who are attuned to the gender, politics and dynamics, are better able to support the local woman, migrant woman, whether they are returnees or aspiring to become one. One of the things, and this is something that we have to keep reminding, is the globalization of labor means that there is a constant need to find cheaper workers, right? And cheaper workers, often that means whatever country which has experienced or financial economic hardship, natural disasters, climate change crisis, so on and so forth. So the global market is ever opportunistic in seeking the cheaper workers who are willing to accept even lower wages and poorer wage conditions, because they don't have many options back home. And so in thinking about that is, what is the obligation of the destination countries, right? when they are getting these cheaper labor, what is their duty? What is their duty of care? And the feminization and the devaluation of housework, whether it is both in the home country, origin country, or the destination country, have to be questioned. Looking at Australia as well, housework or unpaid, they call it unpaid labor, continues to be devalued. Similarly with, people in the cleaning industry, childcare, so on, because these are typically jobs seen as occupied by women, right? And typically non-white and migrant women, people where English is not the first language. And so there is a lot of that gender, class, caste, nationality. Nationality is a huge driver of inequality in labor exploitation in the domestic sector. And so that unpaid labor needs to be questioned. The feminization of domestic work needs to be questioned. And the intersection of racism, sexism, and classism and caste need to inform policy and programmatic responses. Countries from time to time, the sending countries sort of crack down on trying to restrict women from leaving, but that has never actually stopped women from trying to do so, because if there are no work, no money available locally, they have to find something else somewhere else. And that actually becomes one of the drivers for unofficial, illegal migration. And so how to respect women's human rights, respect their right to work, is paramount. And I think also respect to gender equality is paramount in the framing and in consulting and ensuring that migrant women's voices and input into what they see as solutions must be key to everything that we work on. So with that, thank you for listening. We'll move to I'll stop share and we can move to Q&A.
Thank you, Joyce. That was great. And I know we've got a hand up, so we might go with that and then we'll move into the chat. Oh, the hand's gone, but we've got Linda who's got her hand up. So go, Linda.
I was applauding.
Oh.
Thank you, Joyce. That was an excellent presentation.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, and perhaps somebody else was applauding. Does anyone else have a question? Anyone online who has a question? Or I'll just jump into the chat. Sorry. Just scroll up a bit here. So we had some, yes, we've got a few people joining us from Bangladesh. Well, actually, no, they're in Sydney, but some people are actually. I'm not sure if they're based in Sydney or based in Bangladesh at the moment. So yes, they're all meeting each other online, which is lovely. And let's see. So Anne Lawless, you've got a comment here, which I'm happy to read out. But if you would like to turn on your screen or ask, you're welcome to. Otherwise, I'll jump in. I'll give you a second or two if you'd like to ask your question directly, or the comment perhaps. The comment was, yes, thank you, Joyce. Yes, some financial security for a woman family as a measure of empowerment does not take into account structural and contextual issues impacting on women, as is shown by this research. So that was supported by some people there. And then Fahima has asked, I've been wondering if there's any coercion on the women to go or to go back to work abroad by their family. So,
yes, thank you, both Anne and Fahima. Yes, there is coercions in some cases, not the explicit you have to go back to work, but more of a pressure to escape. So for instance, I mentioned about the domestic violence or family violence. And so that then becomes a driver that pushes women to go out again because home is not a safe space. The woman whom we spoke with husbands who have drug or alcohol, sometimes both addictions, yes, that can become a huge push because the financial burdens and debt
Thank you. And Ying Dong has asked a question. I'm also curious about if single women or divorced women had different experience with women who has a husband, what variables are there in their different experiences?
Thank you. Good question. You know, so it was a little bit difficult to interview the husbands. Most of them were a bit shy or reluctant to talk to us, mainly because of the stigma. You know, there's that whole idea of, oh, you know, you let your wife go abroad. What's wrong with you? Can't you support your own family? You know, something wrong with you. That this whole masculinity is being put into question. And so then that means that the husbands we spoke with tend to be the ones who are supportive, you know, supportive of the woman's decision to go overseas, or even, you know, as you see in the quote, someone said, oh, you know, I sent her, I sent her overseas. So in that sense, getting a family approval is really important. And the marital status can affect in the sense that not so much in this study, but the one in the poll cases where we found that single women who come back sometimes have difficulty finding, you know, people who you know, eligible people to marry with, because she is sort of seen as impure, possibly engaged in sex work, prostitution overseas. And so then that becomes, you know, almost like you know, an even worse thing if a single woman goes overseas. In terms of where women have a better experience going away and coming back, better received by the community, is where there have already been women gone overseas, came back, you know, had a positive experience, and the community are used to it. You know, they're like, oh yeah, you know, okay, she went away, she came back, and there was nothing wrong with it. It's normal. And so there has to be that normalization of this to occur, because what the woman does is they're challenging the fabric and the gender norms of the society. It's something that they do. But then once that has become accepted as a practice, then people usually are more tolerant or even supportive.
All right, we've got another question in the chat, and from Anne regarding a sensitive question: are there parallels between these issues and modern slavery?
We didn't explore modern slavery because our research parameter was more along, so that we had a very tight parameter in that we were asked to look at the processes of migration, from, you know, how they were recruited, what sort of support they were provided, to what, you know, how things happen once they get to destination country. We do find that where countries, the sending countries, are at a weaker economic, you know, status, they are less able to advocate for the women migrant workers once they're overseas. And so in the sense that becomes sort of like a nation-state patriarchal bargaining, you know, where the women, the citizens, are trapped in another country, and the nation where it came from is not able to advocate because they're seen as weaker, and therefore, you know, not as able to support or defend their own citizens. In the study that we did in Nepal, for example, women were in a very stressed spot when COVID first hit. They were stranded overseas. Some of them reported being just dumped. This is in Lebanon. They were dumped on a roadside by their employers with their suitcase, you know, outside the consulates, and just, you know, sort of, you know, go and find your way home, sort of thing. And so part of that is also about the sending countries' bargaining power, or the ability to mobilize support.
Thank you.
Linda?
Thanks. I did actually have my hand up that time. Joyce, I was just wondering, one of your recommendations was around, listening to the women's voices and their perspectives around and recommendations about what would work. And I'm wondering to what extent has ILO kind of increased investment in supporting migrant women-led support networks, advocacy networks, both in sending and destination countries, whether that was something that you sort of looked at a bit, or was it beyond the scope? Thanks.
It was a little bit beyond our scope, but we are in our communications with ILO, they are keenly aware that this sort of donor sort of funded system is not sustainable, because local NGOs are constantly having to, renew their contract, apply for grants. And so a lot of the time it's actually spent trying to get money to do the work as opposed to actually doing the work themselves. The challenge is that, so for example, this Work and Freedom project and the evaluation that came with it was funded by the UK government. And as we know, the UK government has been slashing and cutting the UK aid budget until there's virtually nothing left. And I think with this increasing sort of cost of living crisis and so forth, governments, the wealthy OECD countries are becoming more and more insular, looking inwards, having to justify more and more to their constituents about how they spend foreign aid and why they're spending foreign aid. And that is another layer of challenge as well. But definitely having more local support, and that means, Bangladesh government or Nepalese government taking that responsibility as well is really important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've got one more message. I was about to ask a question, but we've got one more question, so I'll just move down. Conducting research on this sort can be taxing on researchers and other members of the team. Early feminist research raises the vulnerability of the researcher when researching injustice. Might be valuable to PhD students here if you briefly discuss if you built mutual care and support for researchers into the research design.
Thank you. And so as part of that, we work as a team, and we're very much focused on identifying those researchers in the fieldwork level are those who have already conducted similar researches already with experience. And part of that was about trying to mitigate the risks and harm that can be brought to the researchers on the ground. Because of the short time frame, we were mindful that we may not be able to provide as much, on-ground support as needed. But having said that, we have set a structure in terms of debriefing, adequate time for rests in between fieldwork sites. We have regular communications with the research team about what's been going on, what were the focus group like, and so then they can share also some of the conversations and reflect upon that. And yes, and certainly I think for PhD students, it's part of that is that you do when you conduct sensitive topics like this, when talking with local communities, when talking with people, you can actually, there is, well, we're human. I should think that, it would be sad if nobody's affected. You do bring that with you. And so creating some sort of debriefing, if you're a PhD student, how to create that debriefing with your supervisor, for example, and also with trusted colleagues, family, friends, is paramount. I would also recommend things like keeping a journal, not a journal for note-taking, that's separate to that, but a journal to reflect on your reactions and how you felt, the emotions, because all of these things are really, really important, not to bottle it up. I did my PhD in, my topic was on, if I can just talk a little bit about my own experience of not looking after myself. My PhD was on looking at how aid programs involve men in these anti-violence against women programs in conflict and post-conflict countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Timor-Leste. I was on a very time frame. I sort of went to each country for about 1 to 2 months, really just kept trying to collect as much data as possible because I was on a very tight budget. And also my university wasn't very happy for me going off in the first place and sort of telling me, you know, you have to come back as soon as possible, please. So I didn't get as much debrief as I should have and I could have. And I came back just quite drained and probably had a mild case of PTSD as a result because of that lack of care that was built in. So I really recommend, if embarking on sensitive topics, is to talk about it with your supervisor in terms of how you can build that mutual care, but also care of the communities that you conduct research with, ensuring that their safety and confidentiality is not compromised, and that, you know, that they have also referral and adequate sources of support.
Thank you. The wise words for sure. I have one question, if that's okay, because I don't think there are any more, unless anybody else out there wants to put their hand up. Ying, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah, I just have a quick question. So why did you choose to use group discussion for those women? Because sounds like me is kind sensitive.
We explored that. One of our colleague, Saida Rashid, has experience in working with migrant women in these areas, and we had explored, you know, what are the best modes of data collection. And what we found was that individual interviews is more challenging because the ability to access the woman, often that would mean individual interview would have to be conducted in their own house, where the husband or the in-laws may be present. But if we have it as a focus group where we have similar cohort, you know, women who have been working overseas and came back, so one cohort, women who have been, you know, wanting to go overseas, and there's another cohort. So sometimes there is that safety in numbers because there is that homogeneity of experiences. And what we have also done was very carefully designed the focus group discussions and questions so that they are not about individual experiences, but rather, you know, experiences which are common to all the women. Although some, you know, but once, you know, when you start to build that rapport with people, they do share, but, you know, that's only when they feel comfortable to share. And that's one of the interesting dynamics with focus group is that you can tell a group is successful when everyone wants to share and that they don't actually want the conversation to end.
Thank you. We've just had Linda, if you want to just, I'm not going to ask my question, I'll have to save it for another time. Linda, I don't know if you want to just, well, in the chat, Linda's just posted about a workshop that the Forced Migration Research Network have planned with the Caldor Center as part of the Emerging Scholars Conference, focus on trauma-informed approaches to research with a guest session from STARTS. So that's survivors of torture and trauma, I think. And so the link is in the chat if anybody's interested in following up with that. And we are almost out of time. I'm going to jump in with my quick question, if that's okay. And hopefully you can answer in like 10 words or less. But the question was just about the pre-departure training, whether the drive for that comes from the Bangladesh government or whether it's recommended by receiving countries.
More from, I think, civil societies and activists,
Okay.
and also women themselves, in that, you know, we actually need to support these women with information before they go.
Of course, but it's not promoted by Bangladesh government, or
It is. So
Okay.
there are these formal trainings, the 1 month training that I spoke of, which provide language as well, language training as well. And that had a slightly more mixed responses
Sure.
because women are time poor in terms of being able to make that commitment. Because bear in mind, once they have made that commitment, they've already paid several $1,000s of migration fees.
Sure.
And to go on a month-long training, you know, that's livelihoods lost in going to the training.
Sure.
And so I think those training are incredibly important, but how do you balance that with the practical needs of the migrant woman is really important.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I'm afraid we've hit 4 o'clock, so we've run out of time, but everybody who's joined today, within about a week, you'll receive a link to the recording of this. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thanks especially to Joyce for a really, really interesting presentation. It's generated a lot of questions and interest, and yeah, prompted some more information about further information that we could all benefit from about the upcoming workshop. So before we finish, our next SPOC CSRH seminar will be on the 21st of November with Professor Kath Albury and Dr. Samantha Mannix, and it's called Reframing Digital Sexual Health from Individual Literacies to Workforce Capabilities. So we hope you can join us for that. And thank you everybody for joining today for a really, really interesting seminar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.